Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining our live webinar, Empowering Nonprofit with Key Finance Features and Overcome Industry Challenges. We are going to start in a moment. But before we do that, I just want to go over some housekeeping item with you all. Please be aware that the session is being recorded and will be shared with all the attendees as soon as it is ready. Everybody that is joining will be automatically muted and the camera turned off. And if you have any questions along the way, please share them using the Q&A on the top right of your console. We'll address all your questions toward the end of the session. All right, so let's get started. So once again, welcome everybody. Happy and excited to see you all here. Glad to see that so many of you have joined our session today, and I see that more are actually joining as we speak. I actually recognize already a few names here that were also part of our first webinar on de-risking your nonprofit technology platform and increasing employee happiness. So thank you again for joining. But for those of you that have missed it, I would strongly encourage to review it. It is a wealth of information that we put out there, and I believe will be helpful and useful for many of you. Today's webinar is the second in a series of webinars designed to empower nonprofit organizations with the right tool that could help them to make an even more significant impact within our communities. For those who don't know me yet, my name is Gary Servius. I am a senior account executive at SparkRock. I've been in the ERP space for quite some time, for over a decade, helping both for-profit and non-for-profit organizations with the right solution to manage and automate their processes when it comes to finance and HR. And the more I work with non-for-profit organizations, the more I want it to become those to become my main focus. And that's how I end up with SparkRock, because it gave me the chance to do just that. And I'm sure I will have the opportunity to talk to many of you that have joined us today. As you know, we are a Microsoft business partner and work very closely with the Microsoft Social Impact team. So before we get to the main content, I want to pass it over to Brian Allen from Microsoft to kick things off and talk a little bit about the amazing work that they are doing with non-for-profit. Please welcome Brian.
Thank you for that introduction, Gary, and good morning or good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining. My name is Brian Allen, and I am a Territory Channel Manager with the Tech for Social Impact. And the Tech for Social Impact is a business unit inside of Microsoft that focuses on providing nonprofit organizations with the software solutions for Microsoft that enables them to meet their mission outcome. And so in 2017, Microsoft decided that this group was needed to enable them to achieve their overall mission of empowering every nonprofit and international organization on the planet to achieve more. So they adapted their commercial business operation model and added a social impact addendum to it, and created a unit that has since that time been instrumental in helping our partners reach nonprofits around the world to provide them with discounted and granted software from Microsoft. And you can go to the next slide, Gary. Now, there's a range of software solutions available from Microsoft to nonprofit organizations, assuming they meet the eligibility criteria. One of those products is Dynamics 365 Business Central. And as you can see from this chart, Business Central integrates extremely well with many of the Microsoft software applications that you'll provide, such as Microsoft 365 and Power Platform. And it sits atop the Microsoft Azure capability so that you have cloud access and you have the security and data management that you actually need. Business Central is primarily a financial software solution that does include some other capabilities around human resource and the like. One of the things you'll find with Business Central is that a lot of nonprofit organizations, although they don't believe that they have a need for a solution such as this, they are beginning to realize that a product like Business Central is extremely important to their overall donor management system that they've set up to track donations and the like. I don't know, Gary, I don't know if that's the only slide that I have, but if it is the end of the slide deck, I'll
Yes,
pass it back over to you and let you drive. Thank you.
sounds good. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Brian, for this reminder of the fantastic work that Microsoft is doing for nonprofit community. Many of you are already familiar with SparkRock, and many of you were actually part of the first webinar. So this information might seem a bit redundant for some of you. But for the one that have not heard about SparkRock before, for those that may wonder what SparkRock is about, and that I want to give you a little bit of background on who we are, what we do, and how we partner with Microsoft. SparkRock was created in 2003, exactly 20 years ago, right? And always had a very unique position from the beginning. So from day one, we partner with Microsoft and work end-to-end with them as part of the Microsoft Embedded program. When most people think about Microsoft, they do not think about ERP. But as many of you know, right, Microsoft has been the ERP business for over 30 years. And as Microsoft evolved over the years through technology and innovation, so did we. So today, we are built on top of Microsoft ERP cloud solution called Microsoft Business Central that Brian mentioned, which is a very robust and proven ERP solution meant specifically for for-profit organization. And I'm sure many of you are already familiar with it. So what we find with our experience is that when you work with nonprofit and human service organization, is that Business Central, like many solutions that are made for businesses, are missing key functionalities that organizations like yours really need. So there are requirements around invoice approval, around managing funds, around grant accounting, or around generating specific reports, complex regulatory reports that you have and that do not exist for for-profit organization. And non-profit organizations that end up using those tools that were specifically designed for businesses end up wasting a lot of time and resources and having to implement a lot of manual process, which is very detrimental for the organization, but it could also impact their ability to better focus on their mission. In fact, before we came along, non-for-profit organizations had pretty much just choice between well-established solution designed specifically for businesses, and as we discussed, it is less than ideal, right? Or niche ERP solution built for non-for-profit organizations that unfortunately are not as robust and well-developed that solution available for businesses, right? And worse, they lack the stability and security that larger organizations could offer. With SparkRock, what we do is that we bring together in one side all the security and stability of the Microsoft infrastructure, and on the other side, the sector-specific expertise of SparkRock with all the features and functionalities that are specific to the need of non-for-profit and human services organization. So really, we give you the best of both worlds. What we bring to the table is our capacity to leverage Microsoft investment in Business Central, which is significant, not only because it's cloud, but because you're benefiting from all the privacy and security investment. And as you know, Microsoft make ongoing investment, not just in the features and functionalities, but again, in the privacy, the security, the mobility support, the interoperability within the Microsoft environment and ecosystem. And I have to say that Microsoft is doing a pretty impressive job. So in this webinar, all of us here, we are all Microsoft users. We all use the Microsoft Office, Microsoft Teams, and Microsoft plays a big role in our everyday work experience. And you will see when James gets into the demo how the application works and integrates with Microsoft Teams and Outlook and the whole Office 365 suite. So not only we leverage all the Microsoft resources and all the Microsoft investment, but then on top of that, we are offering vertical specific functionalities that were developed through 20 years of investment in that space. So I'm very confident to say that SparkRock is designed to meet non-for-profit organization expectation in a way that no other out-of-the-box solution in the market can today. But before I hand it over to James to present how key finance features can help overcome non-profit challenges, I'd like to share one customer success story with you. So every day I have the chance to sit and talk with key players of non-for-profit organization, right? The controllers, the director of finance, the CFO, to help them overcome their challenges. So I'd like to talk about one of them. Toward the end of 2021, we were contacted by an independent non-profit organization whose mission is to support marginalized youth through various programs in Alberta. The challenge that they had was that as the demand on the organization grew, they struggled with providing transparency and accountability from their legacy system, right? The system that they were using at the time was too cumbersome to allow them to optimize fund management and provide budgetary control. And reporting was long and labor intensive, and most of their process were actually manual and paper heavy. And as a result, they were dealing with time-consuming process, inefficiency, staff frustration. Well, you get the picture, right? And because of this, they began to look into a system that was better tailored toward the specific needs of non-for-profit. And because SparkRock Finance Solution is built specifically for nonprofit, users found it very easy to understand and navigate right from the beginning. Out of the many advantages that they gain, it includes optimized fund management, tighter budget control due to automated accounting, budgeting, and reporting, time saving due to efficient real-time reporting, greater departmental integration, ease in producing financial statement, visibility on purchases, automated requesting, budget check, and approval process, and finally, easier administration due to personalized and data-centric admin. And soon after implementation, the staff noticed immediate time saving as the retrieval of financial information become much easier to access. The labor-intensive element of the reporting function that they had to deal with for so long was gone. So with improved reporting and analytics, the board and senior management now add the data and the time they need to make more informed decisions to run the organization. The board also gained end-to-end visibility from purchase order to payment with requisition approval, workflow, and automate orders based on business rule. And finally, the staff is no longer burdened with the manual processes such as rekeying of information or having to deal with a mountain of paper invoices. So overall, their transition to SparkRock enabled them to grow and scale. They were able to enhance their ability to assist greater number of community members and need of the service, and even create one additional program to support young adults. And really, this is the type of partnership that we're extremely proud of. And through that story, you really see how having the right solution would impact you and make your and give your organization the ability to better serve your community. All right, so now that you have a better idea of who we are, what we do, let's get to the main event. And for that, I want to introduce you to our senior project consultant, James Faux.
All right, thank you very much, Gary and Brian. Welcome everybody. And yeah, so today we're going to focus on 4 key themes. Before we do that, I'll quickly introduce myself. Again, I'm James Faux. I have worked for over 25 years with helping nonprofit organizations make technology decisions, and I've done that in lots of different capacities, from implementation to product development to helping organizations make decisions around what is the right fit for their organization. And so, as I mentioned, we're going to focus on 4 key themes today. We'll look at those themes, sort of what they mean in terms of challenges and how to see if that's something that applies to your organization. And then we'll take a look at some of the tools that can really help alleviate those kinds of challenges. So I'm going to dive right in, and so again, we're focusing in the area of finance and procurement today. So obviously, as some of the things that Gary mentioned, nonprofit organizations face these really unique challenges. And today we'll spotlight key features that can liberate your organization from these challenges. We're going to explore how gaining control of your budgets, ensuring budget availability in real time, implementing system-generated approvals, and accessing real-time reports can transform finance and procurement processes in your organization. Okay, so let's get into our first theme, which is how to get control of your budgets. Nonprofit organizations face those kinds of challenges primarily because they have a significantly higher number of pots of funding that they need to manage, right? Unlike for-profit organizations where you have a single mandate, you're selling something or you're making something, it's fairly focused and contained. Nonprofit organizations are often piecing together their budget with small pots of funding from various sources, and having those many masters means they need to manage all of those different things. So managing that complexity from the budget cycle all the way to the payment cycle, so the beginning of when you're planning how to spend that money to when you finally spent that money is very challenging, and often the data, that the information that's in between each one of those stages, the beginning stage and the ending stage, is where a lot of the challenges and uncertainty lies. So let's talk about some of the challenges for organizations that don't have the right tools in place to manage those kinds of things. So what do we see in those kinds of organizations? So symptoms of those kinds of organizations might be managers who maintain their own shadow systems, right? So this is a scenario, for example, if you don't have the right tools that are tracking all of those expenses, and I'm a manager who's responsible for a narrow slice of the budget, I might be maintaining my own copies of everything that I approve, all those other transactions that I'm planning to make or that are in various stages of approval within the organization, because the systems that we have in place are not tracking that sort of in-between stage, right? Another symptom is managers who have responsibility and let finance deal with all the discrepancies. So if it's very difficult for me to do that, I might just leave it in the hands of finance. And when there's a problem, kind of contact finance right away. And that leads into the third symptom, which is finance teams that are scrambling to determine actual to budget status when asked, right? So if you're dealing with that kind of situation, finance is usually sort of tabulating everything and trying to figure out what it is if you don't have the right tools in place. So that's those are some of the challenges, and really the solution is to implement solutions that allow you to know exactly where you are versus budget in real time, right? So let's take a look at some of those tools. Primarily, they connect into a concept called commitments and encumbrances. And so I'm going to move over into the application and walk you through what that looks like in SparkRock 365. So today's demonstration and themes are really focused around financial management, finance and procurement areas, right? So this is the accounting manager role center. So it's a senior finance user, where I've got key performance indicators here, things that are alerting me to things that I need to pay attention to right on my home screen. So it's very, very easy for me to, at a glance, get insight into the health of my organization. Now we're talking about the commitments and encumbrances and sort of budget to actual information. So I'm going to go into the chart of accounts, and this chart of accounts allows me to see what's going on. I can actually really quickly search through, and so I'm going to search for all of my accounts that are related to programs simply by typing the word program in the top, and you can see it finds various different things here, including allocations, and is searching through multiple columns to find me this information here. Now, what we want to focus on is really these columns that are here, the budget, commitment, encumbrance, and the net change. And these are the ones that are actually giving us insight into exactly where we are at budget. In this particular case, this is a view for finance. We'll talk a little bit later about some of the views for end users or managers that are in the field and the tools that they have access to, but this is a view for finance. And this is a roll up across the organization of all of our program related accounts. We can see the total program expenses here in terms of budget, and then the total actual, and then the total budget available, right? And on top of that, it's showing us the breakdown in the middle of those two ends of the spectrum, as I mentioned before. So commitments generally are tied to internal approvals. So primarily it's tied to a requisition type document or documents that are in that requisition type stage, an internal commitment. So if I'd like to spend funds against a particular program, I can create a requisition, send it off for approval, and that's going to tie up those funds and show that there's these dollar values tied up against that particular budget. So the other benefit of how commitments and encumbrances work in SparkRock 365 is that they're drill downable. And not only are they drill downable, right? I can click on it to see what are all of those transactions, but it's showing me exactly what the line items are that are causing that balance. I have worked with other systems and they're showing, you know, sort of a whole bunch of debits and credits, ins and outs. And it's very, very difficult to reconcile what actual transactions are causing the balance, the funds to be tied up. So this is usually recognizable to the end user. I can see it's these masks that I ordered, or you know, other types of expenses here. Here's even the vendors that they're targeted for on these requisitions, and I can see those. On top of that, if I want to see more details, I can actually click on the show document and it opens up the full requisition document for me to see here. And I can see, you know, any other lines, any other comments here, who the approvers are, any other items in terms of status or details on this document transaction. So that's the commitments where it's showing, again, early stage things that are internally committed. Again, if I need to cancel any of those or reverse those, then obviously I have more flexibility at this stage. The other column here is the encumbrance column. So again, I'm in my supplies line here, and encumbrances are typically linked to purchase orders or contracts within the organization, right? So that's an external commitment. So you've already, a contract or a purchase order is a legal agreement with a vendor to spend those funds. So if the product hasn't been shipped yet or the service not delivered, obviously you still have more choices in terms of what to do with it, but the funds are tied up a little more firmly under this column. And again, just like the commitments, the encumbrances also show you the actual line items. It's not a whole bunch of debits and credits, it's the actual line items. And of course, if I want to open up this purchase order or this contract, I can simply click on show document and it's going to open up that PO. And I can see what other items are on it, you know, approval statuses, or notes, or any other details about that transaction as well. So this is the first tool that, again, if you don't have these tools in place, commitments and encumbrances, and the appropriate procedures around really getting your organization on board with tracking expenses, letting the system know about planned expenditure as early as possible. You know, once you have those in place, it can be truly revolutionary in terms of providing everybody in the organization with the details of knowing exactly where you are in terms of budget. Okay, so I'm going to go back to our PowerPoint here. So again, this is knowing exactly where you are versus budget. So the second theme I wanted to talk about is sort of a related theme. It's budget availability, and really when and where users need to do that. So another challenge is related to the fact that in many cases, managers in the field are focused on delivering on their function, right? They're specialists in the mission of the organization, whatever it is, the function that they're responsible in. And in many cases that may or not, it doesn't guarantee that they're specialists in finance as well. So it's really up to the technology and tools in the system to really help those users stay on top of their budget. And so let's take a look at some of the challenges. So symptoms of organizations that don't have the right tools are things like managers getting reports only after the fact. So if you think of a typical life cycle of an organization where you don't have access to real-time budget checking, often the only tool left for those teams are to wait on reports that are coming out of the finance team. Usually those happen after month end, so the time has already elapsed from month end, and then whatever time it takes to generate those reports. So what could be happening is that those managers are getting information, financial information that might be 2-3 weeks out of date by the time they get it in their hands. And so they're expected to make time-sensitive expenditure decisions based on data that's already 3 weeks out of date by the time they got it. And so again, They again, it's driving the same behavior we talked about in the first theme, where maintaining shadow systems or abdicating responsibility are some of the things that happen, right? And again, when you don't know what's happened in that intervening time, or you weren't able to keep track of it all, then there's that heavy reliance of finance for budget decisions. And generally, that entire cycle is very, very frustrating for both teams, right? The managers as well as for finance. They're just trying to get their jobs done, and there's a lot of this disruptive behavior back and forward trying to make these decisions. So let's take a look at the solution. It's really providing real-time budget access and embedding it into the cycle, into the process where users need to access it. So I'm going to pivot over to another role center in SparkRock 365. So this is a department manager. So it's a role center that's designed specifically for managers or users who are in the field. And so another concept that we feel is quite unique to this sector, to the nonprofit sector, is really this idea that budget managers in the field need to function as the mini CFO. However, it's for only their narrow slice of the budget, right? They need to access deep information, but only for the information that they have access to. And so when I log into this role center, again, I can take a look at different statuses for requisitions, payment requests, expense claims, purchase orders, and everything that I see on these lists is filtered based on my security. So I have access to one program or two cost centers or one department or 3 grants. Every place that I click here, the data is filtered only for whatever it is that I have access to in my security domain. So I'm not going to focus on these other boxes. We're talking about real-time budget checking. So I'm going to show that to you in a requisition. So let's say that I'm planning something for one of the programs that I have responsibility for. So as soon as I do that, the system auto assigns a new requisition type here. This is going to be a standard requisition. I can select a different type here. And then I come down in the lines. I'm going to select an expense type here. In this case, I'm going to order some meeting supplies for a special event that we're hosting. And I'll just enter a quick description here and a unit cost. And I'm going to select an account set. So I'll select the top one here. And if you notice to the right, you can see all of the dimensions that it's filling out for me. So founder, grant, department, fund, contract region, GL account, all of those things get filled out. I'm not focusing too much on what they are, but you'll see what happens in a moment with those. So that's the first one I'm selecting. And then I'm going to order some more meeting supplies while I'm at it. Oops. There we go. And I'll select a different account. Again, I just wanted to show you a little bit about what happens if I've got 2 different accounts on these. And as I mentioned before, in this scenario, I'm a really busy manager. I've got a lot going on. I'm responding to client needs, whatever it is, dealing with my staff on the field. And so, again, in a typical system, I would stop at this stage. I would swivel chair over to whatever latest report that I got from finance, try to find these line items on that report to see if I have sufficient budget. And, hopefully it's not, there's not a lot of intervening transactions that have happened since I got that report. Again, it might be a 3-4 weeks out of date by the time I'm doing this, right? So in SparkRock 365, I don't need to do any of that. I can just simply submit this approval request, and the system does a real-time budget check. And so you can see here it's saying, hey, this is going to put you over budget. Do you want to continue anyway? And that's because I've got my workflow set up to a warning only. You can set it up to an error, or you can set it up to require an additional approver if it's going over budget. So those are your choices. So in this case, I'm going to say no. And what the system does is it does the equivalent of calling up my real-time budget to actual report. And so if I click on these 2 lines, I can see here on my lower line, I've got actually available amount before request. I've got lots of budget left on that lower line, but the top line is the one that's problematic. I had no budget to begin with. I can see I've got 11,000 and change in commitments, another 11,000 and change in encumbrances, 38,000. So I'm $61,000 already over budget before this even started. And so this is going to put me into even further. It's going to be 61,634.99, right? And if I'm surprised at these amounts, well, I can drill down on them. Maybe I forgot about what's making up that 11,000. So just like the finance users could look up commitments and encumbrances, I also have my own streamlined view to see exactly what those values are. The same thing with encumbrances. So right from the budget checking screen, I can see the documents that are making up those values in each one of these columns and try to understand what's going on much better. So again, this is truly empowering, saving enormous amounts of time, creating a dramatic transparency in the organization by allowing users to see in real time this information right as they're entering budgets, like right in this stage of the requisition. We have similar budget checking that's available to be turned on at the invoice stage if you want it there, at the purchase order stage, at the requisition stage, on a payment request, as well as on an expense claim. So these are things that are very, very unique to SparkProc 365, especially expense claims. And so again, if you're a heavily budget-driven organization, these are tools that are really invaluable in helping stay on top of those. Okay, so really this means that your organization will know exactly where you are compared to budget at any time in real time without that intense dependence on finance brute force calculations to determine that. Okay, so let's move on to our third theme, which is system generated approvals. So, as we talked about the complexity in funding, right? These multiple pots of funding managed by multiple individuals, a very distributed network of managing budgets in the organization, and trying to make sure everybody is on top of everything in some case can be very, very challenging and complex. While for the for-profit sector typically, sends everything to the finance department for all financial matters and approvals, for organizations like yours, you really need this complex network of approvals that relate to many different sources of funding, whether it's a department manager approving or a grant manager approving transactions related to that grant, or a program manager. Those kinds of things often require this sort of network of approvals that need to happen. And again, symptoms of organizations that don't have the right tools in place are things like manual or email-based approvers. And along with those kinds of things, we see when it's a human enforcement of an approval, you get into scenarios like what we call signature shopping, right? I know that Gary is a little more amenable to this cause than somebody else, and so I'm going to go to Gary to get that approval at this time of day. Or you're really sort of picking and choosing, or you're trying to get around with that signature shopping to try to make sure you get the right approvals in place. Another challenge is really having to split up transactions into different documents to support single-threaded approvals. So if I have one line that maybe is IT related and another line on the same requisition or document that's related to a program related transaction, maybe they're for the same event, but I might have to enter completely separate documents, email off and get email approvals and attach those emails as proof of the approvals from different managers. That also can be hugely inefficient to the organization, can really reduce the throughput of those particular departments. And then the final is really approvals happening after the fact or managed by AP, for example. So think of, for example, the choices that the organization has. If you're keeping the approval to the final stage when the bill comes in, the choices that the organization has in terms of whether or not that expenditure is actually appropriate for the organization are very few. Right, you've already incurred the expense. If the product's already been shipped or the service already been delivered, the only choice is what budget can I plug this into, not whether or not it's the right time for the organization for this. So again, having those moved earlier into the process, like as early as a requisition or a purchase order stage, gives the organization many more decision points. And on top of that, proving to your auditors that the approval happened before the expenditure is really important in terms of managing their expectations and proving that you're following the appropriate procedures. So the solution is really to have system enforced approval policies. You set them up in the system. What are the conditions? What are the dollar value breaks? what are the workflow approvals, set them up in the system and let the system approve those policies as opposed to having them managed by users, a human enforced policy. So I'm going to go back into the system, and just so you can see how these work in SparkRock 365, I'm going to go back even to the same requisition that we just entered. And so we know it's over budget already, but I'm going to stick my head in the sand for this for the sake of this demonstration here, and I'm going to send the approval request. I am going to continue anyway. That's why I have it set to warning only. And you can see the approval requests have been set. And so I'm going to do that. I can scroll down to the bottom here, and you can see that it's actually there's different rules for the admin department and rules for the program department, where it's gone to JFA, Sherry Hashimoto, and there's multiple levels of approvals here for these different rules that have been checked in. So you can see that, or I can actually look up the approvals themselves over here, and I can see the sequence, whether there's a comment or not, and it's still open, like nobody has approved these yet, right? And so the main point being that the system split up these lines to different approvers because they have different dimensions or different segments on those lines. So it's actually creating the workflow and automatically notifying each of these users automatically for me. So it's not something that I needed to make a decision about, a game time decision about. So I'm going to switch over to my other user, my finance user, and go back to the home page here. And you can see requests to approve. These are the ones that I have to approve here. I can see there's a new one here, this requisition 236. So if I'm an approver, I get access to being able to see this information in real time. I can be notified by email. So if I'm not in my system all the time, I don't need to remember to log in. I can be notified by email or notifications in the app to remind me. Also, for those of you who were on our first demonstration or our first webinar series, we showed you the mobile and tablet apps. So we do have apps for this application for mobile and tablet on all the major platforms. So I might be out in the field. I can also be checking on my mobile app and review this document and approve it from here. So again, if I want to open up, I can look up this requisition here, and I can simply enter that I want to approve or reject this or delegate it if I need to delegate it onto somebody else. In this case, I'm going to use a feature called Approve as Administrator. Typically, this feature is restricted to only very, very few users in the organization, but I'm just going to use it just to be able to move my demo forward here. However, even when I use that, if I go back to my approvals here, you can see that there is still audit trail that the sender was demo 1, the approver was supposed to be Sherry Hashimoto and James Faw, but the approver actually was Jay Faw, and it was approved as the administrator. So there is still audit trail around who was supposed to approve it and who approved it, and I could add notes here explaining why I did that. Maybe Sherry wasn't available, or I spoke to her and had to use this feature to do that. So another point is that there is date and timestamp for the approval request and when the approval was made, and that's very, very useful data because again, it proves to your auditors that the approval happened before the fact and not after the fact. The other added benefit, it also provides you with data on the average time to approve by approvers. So if you do have individuals within the organization that are notoriously slow with approvals, you have some hard data, and we have a Power BI dashboard that can show that to have a conversation with those approvers who are a little less efficient in terms of getting the throughput. Okay. So this means that all stakeholders, including in the approval process, no matter how the document was entered, are able to participate in the approvals, right? We can distribute it through the system, we can track how it's approved, and you're going to ensure that your auditors are happy. Also, if you're not physically in the same location, things like that, if you're dealing with paper signatures still today, then this can also allow you to automate those. It can be a lot faster regardless of where someone is physically, right? They're using their mobile and tablet apps to do that. Okay, so I want to get on to our final theme, which is real-time on-demand access. So as we talked about, there's this cycle that is common in organizations in this sector if they don't have the right tools. That cycle of the sort of month end, all the time it takes to get to month end, and then producing the reports, and then getting reports that are dated out to end users by the time that they get there. So that's the primary challenge that organizations face. And so whether it's proactive budget checking, which we're going to talk about now, or reactive budget checking that we just talked about with the real-time budget checking that's embedded into the transaction, it's always important to make sure that you're providing real-time access to those users. So again, symptoms of organizations that don't have that are this heavy reliance on finance to determine if there's sufficient budget, and a heavy reliance on reports that are out of date, right? The same challenges are coming up since these are all related tools. So let's talk about the solution for that. And the solution is really real-time, on-demand access to managers that does not depend on the heavy efforts of your finance team, right? Let's break that link between all of the work that finance does and the time constraints where they can only do that after month end. And let's break apart that need and provide real-time access to data to those end users. So let's take a look at that. So I'm going to go back to the application. I'm going to go back to my department manager role center here. And SparkRock 365 has a tool. As I mentioned, this role center is intended to provide users with access, real-time access that's filtered based on their security. So even if I go to post to purchase invoices here, it's showing all invoices that have at least one line charged to my department. And if I open up that line item, and one is to my department and there's other line items to other departments, it will hide the ones that are for the other departments and only show me the ones that are related to my department. So it's a very useful feature in terms of allowing users to see real-time transactions across any one of these that are filtered based on those users' security. And in terms of being able to proactively look at budget to actual reports, that is done with a tool called reporting and analytics reports. And these are really simple views that are very, very easy for typically someone in finance to create, and they can assign them to specific users or to groups of users. And those views are subject to the specific user security. So for example, if I go to my departmental analysis and click on overview, it's going to show me in this case only the 3 departments that I have access to, so admin, IT, and education. And again, it's showing that same breakdown. In this case, I've got columns set up for budget, commitment, encumbrance, and actual, right? So I can change the date filters that are here. If I want to get more fancy, I can go in and apply even additional filters over top of those, but it's very, very easy at a glance for me to see the budget to actual here. There's views that can be based on any of the dimensions and based on other things. So for example, even an account set here where I want to see maybe a rolling forecast. So these are specific account sets here, the lowest level, and you can see January to July. These are showing actuals that I can drill down on, and then August through September is showing me budget data. So it's a rolling forecast. And again, I can drill down on each one of these columns to see the specific transaction details, that are making up, and open up the source documents right from there. But again, this kind of access provides users with really, really flexible insight into what they need to see real-time on demand, and it doesn't require finance to put blood, sweat, and tears into generating this. Okay, so just a quick summary of our key themes. In our first theme, we talked about how commitments and encumbrances can provide you with the precise budget to actual information that you need and your organization needs to make real-time decisions. In the second theme, we talked about real-time budget checking and ensuring that users are empowered without the hassle of running different reports or contacting finance. In theme number 3, we talked about electronic approvals and how they can empower communication, transparency, and accountability for everyone involved, including making your auditors happy. And in the final theme, we talked about real-time on-demand access that reduces the burden on finance and really empowers managers to take control of their budgets. So hopefully this has been helpful in terms of providing you with some insight into these themes and the tool that can really help transform your organization, and even some of the processes. Now, in order to help you with internal discussions at your organization, we've provided a super simple finance health assessment. And so I'll quickly just click on this, and just so you can see here, this finance health assessment is really simple. It's a sort of a questionnaire that you can go in. It's an Excel spreadsheet. And you can just go ahead and read the questions here, sort of put in yes or no, and it gives you a score. So if yes, put 0. If no, put 5 here, and it'll total to a score, and then you can compare that to the health scores at the bottom, and it's going to give you a sense of the current state and the next steps, things to consider. So again, if you feel that if your experience is that you're missing some of these key tools in place, or your technology that you have in place today isn't really meeting the needs of your organization, then this might be a great starting point to go through this assessment. Of course, if you have any questions, or if you want us to help you walk through that, then please feel free to reach out to SparkRock so we can walk you through those questions or help you with some more information and details on that. And then just before I hand things back over to Gary to go through Q&A, I did want to talk a little bit about our next webinar in the series. So this will be the 3rd webinar in the series. I know they're recorded as well, so if you want to go back and take a look at the first one, which is on the technology itself, the second one on finance, and this 3rd one, we're really going to talk about the human resources and payroll, and we'll talk about the integration of seamless workflows into human resources and payroll, streamlining of staff scheduling and the benefits that that can provide in managing employees with the appropriate workflows and HR requests. Also, we're going to spend some time looking at features much like today's in those areas. So again, please stay tuned for that webinar that's upcoming. You'll be invited, you'll be sent an invitation to register for that, and we'd love to see you there. All right, so Gary, I'm handing over to you for questions now.
All right, thank you, James. Okay, so now it's time for our Q&A session. I'm sure that you have a lot of questions for us. If you have not done so yet, please ask your question using the Q&A on the top right of your console. If you have questions, well, now it is the right time to ask them. We already have a few questions here on our Q&A. The first question I have here is, I am a user of GP. So for those that are not aware, GP is referring to Microsoft Dynamic Grade Plans. What does the migration from GP to your solution looks like? So this would be a question for you, James.
Okay. Yeah, good question. So GP is probably the application that we've migrated from the most in our history at SparkRock. So I know our team has lots of experience in doing that. And the answer to that question really is there are some data migration tools, but really is how satisfied are you currently with your current GL account structure. So implementing a new system sometimes is an opportunity to revamp and shed some of the things that aren't useful anymore over time. You might have certain things that you're collecting that are no longer useful, and maybe adding in or restructuring your dimensions. So that data will come over more or less matching based on how much change you want to make there. But even if you make significant amounts of change, we typically can provide a mapping of an old value to a new value, and that historical data can get transitioned over in a way that it's useful in the new system as well. So hopefully that's a little bit of context on it. Yeah, we can answer more questions on 101 if we have an opportunity to ask you a few more details about that too.
All right. So the next question we have actually is also a question regarding Dynamic GP. We have so many accounts in GP. Can your system help make that more efficient?
Okay, so that's a great build-on question from the last one. So the answer is yes. So and it's very interesting because Dynamics GP has a concept called a segmented GL account, meaning that you have an account string with a dash right in all of your segments, and it may be a really long string that is those accounts, especially for organizations in this sector, which require you to collect a lot of information. A fund, funder, program, cost center, department, things like that. So you can often end up with a really, really long trial balance and a lot of accounts. And so yes, SparkRock 365 has a hybrid chart of accounts model. So it's a segmented and a logical chart of accounts all at once. And so that allows you to, our consultants can walk you through making decisions that will allow you to set up a very efficient chart of accounts that's not ever expanding or it's not getting cluttered with all of those values. Yeah, again, that's something that we can probably drill down into with you on a 101 a little bit more in detail and show you that. But definitely we can help you with reducing some of those challenges.
So we have a few questions around budgeting and also around workflow. So I'll start with the budgeting one. Can the budget checking take into account several accounts or group of accounts?
Okay, yeah, I can take that one too. That's a really good question, and I'm glad I neglected to sort of highlight that. But also having experience working with other systems that do budget checking, that is a really important feature. So SparkRock 365 has something called budget categories, where you can group similar accounts into a single budget category. So for example, if you have 20 different supplies accounts, but you don't really care which one has budget and which one doesn't, like you want to see them as a group, then you can put all of those accounts in a single budget category, and those budget checking decisions will be based on that budget category. So it won't fail on just because one of these supplies accounts has budget and the other doesn't. It'll roll all of them up together for budget checking purposes. And that really makes a difference between a budget checking feature being useful or just very problematic in the organization. So I'm glad you asked that question because it's a really important feature to consider.
Very good. The next question is also for you, James. I think that actually all the questions today are just for you, James. So
okay.
The question I have here, how does the system handle multiple simultaneous transactions? Is there a risk of oversight if two departments try to draw from the same budget at the same time?
Okay, that's a technical question. Yes. So I know this platform. So this is part of the platform from Microsoft, and it uses something called optimistic concurrency for the technical folks in the on the call here. So really, there would be a millisecond before. So for sure, I click on submit, somebody else clicks on submit. There's going to be a millisecond before, but the system does take into account each other's transactions. In our budget checking, there is other transactions that are in flight that are taken into account as well, and so that isn't a problem. We have implementations that range from only a few users to thousands of users, and the system handles the scale no problem in terms of managing those multiple requests. So yeah, they all go into a queue and they'll be quickly answered, and the calculations will take into account other transactions that are in progress. I think that's the gist of that question. Yep.
Thank you so much, James. That wraps up our Q&A session. Thank you, James and Brian. I can see a few more questions in the chat, but for time constraint, we don't have the time to get to them, but no worries. We will actually reach out to you through emails with the detailed response. We will also have follow-up with all of you with the assessment that we did earlier with James, and so as mentioned at the beginning, we will provide all the attendees with a copy of the recording. So you can review it on your own time, and you can also share it with other members of your organizations. All right, finally, I want to remind everyone that our next webinar will happen on October 17. So if you want to know more about HR, payroll, and scheduling, please make sure to sign up. We are looking forward to see all of you during this next session. Thank you again, everyone, for joining. It was a pleasure to have you with us. I hope that it was very helpful, very useful for every single one of you. If you need more information, if you have any additional question, or your question were not covered actually during the webinar, or if you want to discuss your specific needs and requirement, please reach out to us at connect@sparkrock.com. Our team will be happy to assist. Like, once again, connect@sparkrock.com. And thank you again for joining, and enjoy the rest of your day.